Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight, I have RDV from the Great Midwest. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a film that also takes place in the Great Midwest. It's in the late 1990s. Of course, I'm talking about 1998, John Carpenter's Vampires. Hey, RDV, guess what? Light Near Dark, this one is a Western. I would want to say, what do you think?
I'd say this is one where it's better than Near Dark because it has James Wood kicking ass.
This movie's a lot of fun. I will say this: movies are definitely changing in the '90s, and when I saw a lot of 150-pound soaking wet, pale-faced, bitchy, whiny ass vampires that people seem to love for whatever reason, and all sorts of other weird stuff getting popular. Frankly, it confuses me, but I accept it for what it is. I did notice that when I rewatched this recently, watching James Wood be the hero, anti-hero, whatever you want to call it, he's having a hell of a lot of fucking fun. And I wanted to kind of only half-ass this as people pile in here and talking John Carpenter's Vampires film, probably his last real decent film, John Carpenter, that is. When did being the good guy, the anti-hero, whatever you want to call it, when did people stop enjoying playing that role? Because I think this is probably this would be your line, your betting line of 1998, James Woods, or maybe Blade, because that came out this year and that's phenomenal too. It's cool to do this. Watching James Woods act in here as a leader of a small group hired by the Vatican Church, who, by the way, were the real reasons why vampires were around, as we find out, going around and hunting, of course, the main guy, Valak. It's like, this is kind of far-fetched, but I don't care. It's just a hell of a lot of fun to watch this, and it feels just cool to be in it, and it's brutal. It's got a great look to it. It's shot outside. I think in Arizona is where they filmed it. It's an enjoyable film. It's a lot of fun to me. And boy, you can't get enough vampire stuff or John Carpenter. What's your initial take?
I gotta say, this is a first time watch for me.
Gotcha.
And I don't think I've ever really watched a James Wood film before this. I don't think I've watched if he's in it.
We have talked about Against All Odds many times. Just not live, I guess. James Woods was really hot at this time, though, in the 90s. He's been nominated for a couple of Oscars. He's done a lot of things, too. So I'm telling you, he was the one taking the risk here by being in a B-level kind of film like this.
All right, I take it back. He was in The Specialist. I just remember what his role was in that.
That's right.
And Scary Movie 2. Wow.
He's been in a lot and for a long time.
Like I said, this is a movie I did not know what to expect other than it's going to be vampires and the unknown Baldwin brother who's playing a character named Tony Montoya.
That includes with the other Montoya, but it makes you think of that. It's
exactly the same spelling.
I know.
But yeah, Cheryl Lee playing Katrina. But the biggest takeaway from this movie,
give it to me. I know where you're going.
Terry Silver is the big bad vampire.
I never knew that until today. I never put two and two together. Cobra Kai, Terry Silver is also the vampire because I knew it was a tall bastard, and that was the whole thing about him. And I remember everybody talking about how great he was. And I'm like, then why the hell don't I know him? But there's your answer, Terry friggin' Silver.
Yeah, Thomas Ian Griffith plays Jan Bellick, the big bad master vampire who wants to walk in the daylight. Where have I heard this plot before? Oh, that's right, Blade. Like I said, this was a movie, I could see why it didn't do so well in American theaters. It barely pulled in over budget. It was really even though it was excess overseas. Yeah. There's really does feel like a John Carpenter movie, and John Carpenter movies are usually like either you really like it or it's just one of those movies like, okay, I watched that. It wasn't bad. Overall, I love the whole thing with the vampires being pulled out by the winch on the Jeep.
That's badass.
He's the crossbow. I'm thinking like, what's he gonna do with that crossbow? It's like, I'm like, but yeah, they pulled them out. Surprisingly, the arrow did not break when they're pulling the vampires out because we found out towards the end they have supernatural strength. Mm-hmm. But you'd see them light on fire and explode. And like I said, like no wonder like people they love this movie. Because I've only seen the sequel, Los Muertos, because it's always on freaking TV and Bon Jovi. So I had no idea going into this. I was like, it's really cool. He sets it up, but like when they first walk into that you see Daniel Baldwin and you see James Wood. They got the Jeep and they got the armored cash, armored truck, for bank, usually for transferring money to banks, armored car. And yeah, they pull up to this little like this farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, and he's like, "Yep, that's a nest right there. I bet you it is." So it's like, and then he's like, "Okay," I'm like, "Only two guys versus a bunch of vampires. What's going on here?" And then he opens up the armored car, and all these guys come out, all the gear and stuff. And it's like, I'm like, "Dang, it's all tricked out." And I just love everything, how they go into everything, and they get, just thinking like, and they're firing like some machine guns at these vampires. I'm like thinking like, are they using silver rounds? Because that's my vampire knowledge from all the different movies.
Yeah.
Because apparently it doesn't kill the vampires, but it slows them down a little bit. But they had the stakes, and they it was like the wooden stakes. Like, okay, but the whole thing is they still got to pull them out in the sunlight to kill them.
Yep.
Even though they repeatedly stab them. But overall, though, like I said, it was one of those. It's one of those movies I did not expect to really like as much as I did. It feels straight like a blockbuster right on the wall. It's never been a theaters movie. I can tell you that, though. If you're going into this, it gets in
Right.
theaters. I'm shocked that it even went to the theaters, because in the 90s there were a lot of direct DVD movies. And this should have been.
I will say this, and I'll throw this at you. I've mentioned before how one of the better ways, in my opinion, of the way to get to understand a character, whether you like them or not, or but to be emotionally invested, is to show them not talking but doing. And so, like you described the opening gambit. I've always mentioned before how much I love opening gambits, because they set the tone for the movie.
Yep.
You can do a lot of positive things with it. I understand it may not be an original idea, but it's an idea that works if done successfully. So what do we see here? We see this group of renegade soldiers, if you will, mercs or whatever like that, being led by James Woods, and we see them going to this. It's sunny out, it's hot looking, it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere, and they're looking for a nest. And so we immediately are drawn into action on what's going on. We don't know the background of everybody, we don't know whatever, but they even bring a priest along, which I think is pretty cool. And then you've got them with their communication tech gear and all this stuff. So you're like, okay, whatever's happening, let me just sit back and watch. Let me not take any time to think about what's going on, just watch. And what I do like about this film is that you have to decide with the vampires, what kind of vampires are they going to be? How am I going to present them?
Are they the same as the other movies?
They're all broody, sexy types now in the 90s and mopey, and they're not fun. Here, you get to see how effing difficult it is to kill one, even a nondescript one that looks like a throwaway dummy, off the Dahmer set or something, right? So we see a good 10, 15 minutes of this building up, and of course, the one big question then when they all start talking is I don't get it. This was a nest.
I love
master
how
never leaves the nest. Where's the master?
But
so we kind of get an idea of what's going on, right?
Yeah, I really love though when they're in there, like they gotta be quiet, and one guy quickly opens the door and just like you think, and then you think he's gonna die, but then it comes out like a corpse, a drain. It's like he screams like a little girl. Of course, because you don't know what's gonna happen, because up to this point, I'm watching this movie. I've watched several vampire movies since then, or even before then. That stuff, usually the vampire jumps out, and what kind of vampires are these? Does silver work on them? Or what does at this point I don't know.
Yeah, we want to know the rules.
Yeah. So, and this movie has its own separate rules, so I'll give you that much. So I'm thinking like, why is a priest there? Because I'm thinking he's blessing them. Like, is he giving them holy water? No holy water in this movie whatsoever. I was kind of irritated about that. I was like, really? I want to see them burn, the face, and then instead, all the money went to basically them just getting their, lit on fire and dragged out, which had to be. I'm thinking how they did that, because remember, I don't think green screen was 90s. Did green screen, or was that till 2000s?
I think it was around, or some form of it. But
they probably had
it's still mostly practical effects, really.
Yeah. So basically, you had some guys probably being pulled by the wire, lit on fire. That's what I'm thinking of, because he still had like from Dust Till Dawn. Remember, he had like the big flames go up.
But it's violent looking. It's not, it is. BITCHUTE. It's hard to kill these guys. You see how much they're struggling, even though they're a well-trained elite level unit. And we find out, like you say, about the holy water, that they are a small group that's paid by the Vatican directly to go around doing all this hunting. And we find out that they're been tracking all these different nests that they're reported to go kill on. And so, of course, when they get done, they do like what adults do. And again, there's no kids in this movie. This is not a kid's stupid ass film or whatever like
No,
that.
no,
It's not a
no,
romance or nothing.
no.
They're going to the shitty motel and they're partying and getting down with the hookers and the drinks
Yes.
and all that.
Even
They're
the
letting off
cop,
some steam.
and they pay out the cop.
James Woods meets Cheryl Lee, and then they get massacred. They barely survive. And they take her along because she's been bitten in a very erotic scene. And of course, for those who don't know, that's Laura Palmer from Twin Peaks in a very va-va-voom adult sort of looking way.
James Wood got cock blocked by Terry Silver. Terry freaking Silver, man. Because he's going to have to go get laid. You know, she's like, give me a drink first. So he goes to grab a beer. She's going to go to his separate motel room. Valak, aka Cherry Silver's in there. Basically, he thinks he's
on the ceiling. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, but then you see him, like, so, you see him on the ground between her legs, and like, is he eating her out? What the hell's going on here? Is it oral sex? She knows he's just basically biting her leg, drinking her blood. She's getting off of it. You know,
it was kind of hot.
Yeah, it was kind of hot though. I was like, dang, like she's actually getting off of it. Like, I'm like, I guess this is a vampire dislikes hookers. Because from previous movies, usually a vampire always chooses a bride. So I'm thinking like, is he trying to seduce her, make her his own bride? Is it like a Dracula thing? No, it's not. Completely different, which I was thankful for. So basically they go back, and he goes in there, he starts slaughtering all of them one by one. They waste all their ammo on there. One guy actually gets cut right in half down like in his gut, and they pulls it up and he just
through the belly.
And I'll point out, that's the guy who plays Harvey Bullock in the Christopher Nolan movies in the very beginning. He's the guy who basically Batman pulls him up. He's like, "Swear to me," whatever. Anyway, so it's on Netflix. That's why I watched it. So I gotta say that the gore in this, he's just people getting their faces ripped off and just like, it's like kind of nasty. He's shielding himself with the hookers as they're firing machine gun bullets at him. And like I said, like Terry Silver, the guy who plays Terry Silver, Thomas
Ian Griffith.
Yeah, he is freaking tall. So he looks
6'4", 6'5".
The dude looks pretty like intimidating.
That's the point I'm trying to make here.
Yeah. It's great. I'm glad that they did that. They didn't make him the pretty boy and stuff. He's just a guy. He's smug. He knows what he wants. Now, like I say this, seeing James Wood though in the leather jacket with the shades on all the time, I kept thinking like this kind of looks like a little bit like Ed Harris or like Peter Weller, with with wearing the sunglasses.
Yeah, at that age, I can kind of see it because James Woods himself isn't the biggest of guys, but he's a super smart guy and his personality is very large. But
he also gives out that Lance Henriksen vibe from Stone Cold, whatever it is, or whatever it is. So I'm getting that vibe too because he's pretty much. So after this, we basically fast forward a little bit. The girls bit instead of killing him like Daniel Baldwin wants him to do. They basically use her because they realize this guy's a freaking master and she has a link to him, so we're gonna use it to hunt down and get revenge.
Yep.
He burns the motel down after decapitating all his friends,
Yep.
one by one. It's very gory too. You see him like he's just so distraught. He goes to the Vatican and he's like, and he basically tells him, he's like, dude, who is this guy? And like, what's going on? And like with the master, it's almost like he's tipped off. How does he know my freaking name? So, and he's going to leave. So that's why we meet Father Thomas, I believe, is that right? Father or whatever. I can't remember his name was. But anyway, he's the new priest that's supposed to help him out. And Father Adam. Who I found out actually was an actor I know from later on. It's SG1 and some other movies. But anyway, so this guy's stuck with him. He's like, he doesn't trust him. He thinks they set him up. Basically, Terry Silver wants to get this Black Cross. He wants to walk in the daylight. And it's also revealed that the Vatican, back in the 1300s, basically had tried to exorcise him, but they only got halfway through. Instead, they turned him into the first vampire.
Yep.
And they try to keep this from him, but he basically gets it by basically intimidating the shit out of the new father. And I love how this James Wood, his whole attitude, his whole entire movie, he's like a loose cannon. He doesn't give a care anymore. He's like, I watched my dad turn. My dad, he got bit. He was a hunter. He didn't tell anybody, and then he killed my mother in front of me. And then he tried going after me. I had to kill my own father. So you think I'm going to hold back and torturing you? No. I have no sympathy for him. I have no sympathy for you. I guess he's just so badass.
He is,
And that's
I'm telling you, when you see James Woods in this, you're like, man, that is cool. That's
yeah,
how the lead should be.
men being men.
Yeah.
He makes a comment on the father. He's like, it's like, oh yeah, you in there? It's like, I'll beat you up. You get a little chub, He's like, I'm just fucking with you. And and they even dropped the F word. And I was like, the other word, I'm not gonna say it here because it's a slur.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I was just like, So I mean, what's cool about though is he bonds with the priest later on, and at the end of the movie, the priest basically is like, it's like, yeah, I got a little mahogany, it's like, wow. But overall, I guess it's a pretty good movie. Vampires are vampires. There's no mother effer skating uphill,
Yeah.
There's no cool gadgets other than just him using a crossbow attached to a steel cable that they attach to their winch, and they usually pull the vampires out. But there is one cool scene I want to talk about though, and that is the elevator scene.
Yeah. Go ahead.
They go to this old town. They track them down using the girl's visions. This old western town, and this is where the western part of the movie comes in. Rob, yes, you're right. It's a western movie.
Thank you.
DJAF in the real life here. Yeah. So anyway, the priest decides, hey, I don't know how to operate a Jeep, and all this stuff, I'll do the elevator. I'll be the bait. He goes down there. Instead of sticking to the plan, sticking an elevator, he runs out. Vampire chases him. They're able to pull the vampire out into the sunlight. But the next one, they call because they forgot to keep the elevator going back down. It goes down. One of the vampires goes on it, jumps out, bursts through the door. Like I said, the pyrotechnics on this, I love it.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, it is. Like it's been a while. Everything's so freaking CG. Seeing the actual real thing when they blow things up is just fun. It's just using a freaking crossbow, and he's got his handgun. I mean, even in the beginning, when they were being chased by Terry Silver in the beginning, him and Daniel Baldwin, the girl, and James Wood, they're being chased. They're driving the Jeep, and they're like, oh, he's like, push it. Or actually, sorry, they're in the Jeep, they're in the truck. He's like, push it. Goes like, go faster. He's like, I am, go faster. And he gets on. He pulls out his basically his 45, his Colt 45, and shoots Terry Silver in the head, knocks him back, and he falls on the ground. Like I said, the props are cool in this. Outfits, the very first scenery, the setting, how they shoot everything, cinematography. When they first walk in, the group shot all the vampire hunters.
Yeah.
The one group shot, you're in for a good movie. Even at the end with the cross and the Jeep and everything, it's like it's a town of full of vampires. It's just like they knew how to sell this, even despite it's supposed to be. It feels like a direct DVD movie, and that's and I guess point out that's not a knock on a movie. Sometimes straight to DVDs are better than the theater movies because they know what they have. They have a lower budget, and they work with it, and it works out well.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, look, like I say, it's a pretty simple way that the story is told. You have a group of people, you see them in action. Yes, a lot of them get slaughtered, so we don't have to pay attention to them anymore. Just focus on basically James Woods, the priest, and the other Baldwin. And with the intense way that we see Valak, who we keep calling Terry Silver because that's what we think of right now because he was so damn good. He was so damn good Cobra Kai. Again, he's really in real life. He's really tall, like 6'4", 6'5". Even if he's a short or a tall 6'3", whatever you want to call it. The point is, he's not like I say these gothic pretty boy types from Interview with the Vampire and all that stuff that was just so hot in the '90s forever. It's interesting because again, these guys aren't those kind of vampires that are looking out at the full moon while the bats are out there listening to some violins in the background, wondering about why life is treated them. None of that bullshit. We're animals. We're waking up. It's dawn, or it's dusk. We're gonna go kill and all that, and then we're gonna go sleep in the ground like a friggin' animal. That's what they are. So definitely a very different take on it. And to see James Wood be equally as assertive, tough, or whatever, despite him not being physically big. He's, like I say, he's got that big attitude, and you could believe, okay, this is the matchup we want to see. We want to see the round of 64 tournament get down to the final two, and we want to see these two guys go off at it. And so you know that Cheryl Lee, of course, playing the sexy double agent here as they work, because they're both trying to use her on both sides, because she's been bitten but not completely turned. So there's a window of opportunity there. We get the whole Vatican backdrop story, and of course the guy is a double agent. The Vatican really is crooked, and that's kind of funny to me. Carpenter bagging on religion that way, how he chose to do it. But it makes sense.
Mhm.
But that's all you need, because the story isn't all that. It's these guys, going to a hotel, trying to regroup, trying to find Valak, track him down. They do it. You see a lot more gore and slaughter in here, and like I say, it's by the '90s, gore this way was not really mainstream. And the special effects guy, Greg Nicotero, on here, who's done almost everything, going back to like the Dawn of the Dead from '85 on. You know his name. You've seen him in movies. That's one of the reasons why this looks so good. The practical effects to it. And to me, the ending scene where Valak's got the upper hand, but then we see that the father actually kind of learned his lesson and helped out. It's cool. It makes sense. And we're not even talking about the so-called sequels. But it's definitely a decent movie, but it was so striking even then in the late '90s to realize, holy shit, this is a movie that, while we can say it's a vampire movie and it's graphic and there's a lot of similarities that Blade has with it,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
I don't think of this as a comic movie. I do think of it as a Western. It's Carpenter's last real film to me, and I've watched The Ward, everything else he's done. I just have to say, though, at the same time this year, in 1998, when Blade came out, I was blown away, and I've mentioned to you many times publicly here on the Extreme Movie Show that I consider Blade to be the best, or one of the best, comic book movies of all time, because of its stylish nature, its adult, violent level to it. So I was thinking, wow, if this would only be the way that comic book movies would go, boy, was I disappointed. And I expected, to your point, like you said about Carpenter early on, either you love his stuff or it's just kind of there. I'll watch anything that has John Carpenter's name on it, better or for worse. But
Because
moving forward from here, I was disappointed that he ended up doing Ghost of Mars, not having a good time with it, and then The Ward, and pretty much that's it. It's just, 20
I
years
like
plus
Ghost
of
of
not having
Mars.
anything good.
I like Ghost of Mars for what it was. It's not the best film. Like you said, it's another movie that I don't think did it go to theaters. I can't remember not.
It
But
did.
it
Oh, it
did.
did.
Yeah, it did.
Yep.
And it probably shouldn't have. I mean, it would have made more money just not going to theaters. Now, but when I think of John Carpenter, I think of The Thing. That's the only movie I can think of right away. And then I think now I think of this. I'll probably think of this, but 20 years from now, I'll probably like, oh, John Carpenter Thing, because that's what I know him from. Just like I know Wes Craven, I know him for Scream. That's
Yes.
that's what I grew up with. That Scream is what I know him from. Uh, but it's interesting though. They almost didn't get John Carpenter's film. They had Russell McCullough, the guy who basically directed Highlander
Mhm.
and did some other films. And then because they were going to go for $60 million budget, because they had problems with this, and they also wanted to have Dolph Lundgren. Dolph Lundgren and that director basically left.
Yep.
So then they're looking for somebody. They contacted John Carpenter, who basically, he said in an interview, he had said that he basically was thinking about quitting because he says just directing movies were not fun anymore, because stuff he liked doing was kind of falling out. Nobody really wanted to do anymore. Drama was really big. It's just you weren't allowed to do certain things. And so with the green screen stuff, so when he read this script, he thought of the Wild Bunch, and that's basically what made him really want to do this movie.
Mhm.
So bringing on James Wood, doing this movie, it's what made it a good hit, because John Carpenter likes westerns. He just finished working on Escape LA just before this.
Yeah, and that one was kind of goofy to me.
Admit, yeah. But I mean, I've come to even this movie was kind of goofy a little bit.
True.
With Daniel Baldwin. Every time I saw him, a big gut. I kept thinking, like, when you get Daniel Baldwin, it's like you couldn't even afford Stephen Baldwin, so you got to get Daniel, the lesser known brother, because everybody knows Alec. They also know Stephen, Daniel is like, oh, there is a third brother. What the hell?
All right, but let's compare that to something modern time, because I think you're bringing up an extremely important point that cannot be missed. Um, One thing that was starting to get critical mass here in the mid to late 90s was obviously the internet going online, and you had
Mm-hmm.
all the stories and news about how something was getting made, particularly the Lord of the Rings trilogy with Peter Jackson coming up. And so it was an interesting avenue for people to take to get information, whether it was true or not. And so I clearly recall at this time here all the hype coming out for the Blade movie and what that was going to be like, because Wesley Snipes is a hip dude. Um, and for John Carpenter, you know, even though it was only 98 at the time and he'd been around since the mid 70s, so 20 years is still relatively young being in the business, 25 years. For this to feel like, he's almost calling it quits because he's not having fun, look at it from his perspective. He gets a very little money to do Halloween. He creates something that just took off. And he wasn't trying to do elevated horror, which is the in term now, and all the fake crap going out about like Terrifier 2 about it's the most disgusting movie of all time and people are vomiting and leaving. That's all paid hype bullshit. It's not that gory. New York Ripper you and I did was definitely more graphic, and more realistic looking too. Although Terrifier 2's got a pretty hot chick in it, and it's got a nice aesthetic. It visually looks appealing. But here's the thing. When you've got something like Lord of the Rings today, the Amazon thing, we've come such a long way in 20 years, almost a full generation, where a studio that will spend almost to $1 billion on something and then not let you post your reviews on it or on the websites that they own, change them, and then tell you you're an idiot and you don't get it and understand it. I go back and look at somebody like Carpenter that only really wanted to have creative control of what he was doing to make what his vision is, and he didn't need a big budget for it. And it's like, why the hell would you interfere with it? And this movie in particular, being a big Carpenter fan, following it online before it came to studios, that's all I could hear about was, yeah, okay, we know Dolph Lundgren. Okay, maybe I wasn't so hyped Thomas Ian Griffin at the time, and he did fine in the movie. I liked him a lot in Cobra Kai. But this is a Carpenter film, beginning and ending with that. And James Woods has a lot of fun. But holy shit, how we've come such a long way to sit there and say, well, we're going to go in here and change the way you do stuff. And you and I just recently covered The Keep. Unfortunately, the 90-minute version that's really incomplete. And the fans on that are very passionate. But time and again, the bean counters and the studio heads want to tell an artist how to go about doing it rather than saying, here's what I want, here's the budget, that's it. They always got to stick their fingers into it. So I'm not going to give Carpenter a pass because he just wants to get paid and not do anything these days. That's fine, but it's a fun film. I think it's worth watching, especially if you're a Carpenter fan. Now Blade is timeless to me. Blade is fantastic, but this is very solid too.
Blade had a little more comedy and a lot more CG.
Yes, absolutely.
So that like I said, it is the first time we saw anybody using a sword. Like I said, it was different because also because he was a daywalker, half
breed,
yeah, and he could walk in the Empire Sun. And then you had what's the guy from Convoy, Rubber Ducky? What's his name?
Chris Christopherson.
Yes. See, I mean, you had a good cast. Stephen Dorff was still a little bit of nobody at the time. He done some stuff, but he was a good charismatic villain. But see. That's except that's CG. I still say that Blades was I still love it, more than this, but only for different reasons. This is still a standalone movie, and I gotta say though, watching it, I had fun. I did not know what to expect. I mean, obviously, like vampires, Western, I knew that much.
Right.
I've seen James Woods acting, and he basically, just as Carpenter described, he wanted somebody basically just be just as badass as the vampires he's hunting. And James Wood fit that role. I got Lance Henriksen vibes with him when he was basically beating up the priest, with the knife and cutting his hand and stuff. Like I said, I guess I just kept thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like I'm getting the same kind of vibes as that guy. James Wood asked for the role because he had never done a horror movie before like this before, and he was kind of curious. And I love what what's his name John Carpenter said about he said, like, contrary to what people think, James Wood's not a hard guy to work with. He does the take, which script is, and then he asked, like, hey, can I do it improvise? And he said every time he improvised, it was brilliant, better than what we were doing for the script. so they always went with that. So a lot of you see in this movie is improvised.
Yeah.
So the funny part though about this movie, though, reading up on it, is that they originally considered getting Clint Eastwood. Imagine Clint Eastwood versus vampires, the Western.
No.
That would have been weird, though. Like I said, like I think it might have been really good or it might have been really, really bad. The other option was Kurt Russell, obviously, because the two have a working chemistry together. Bill Paxton, and we just watched him as playing Severin in Your Dark, and being a vampire hunter. What? Al Pacino, that's just a weird idea. Joe Pesci, of all people, they want to get him as the main character, James Woods' character. And R. Lee Emery.
R. Lee Ermey, yeah. You know him.
Yes, and that would have been interesting too. Is that Clint Eastwood in that? But it's just so crazy. It's like, you know, I would have just been weird seeing him as, you know, as other than James Wood. James Wood brought to the table what I feel the other ones couldn't have done. Clint Eastwood was known for Dirty Harry and kind of that movies, not really supernatural stuff. I bet you he turned it down. But
ladies and gentlemen, Vampires, John Carpenter, 1998. Carpenter's last film, in my opinion, and I think Carpenter fans would say that too. It's interesting because, like I say, I always think of 1998. I think of this film and Blade coming out. It reminds me of 1981 when we talked about The Howling, Wolf and American Werewolf in London, how that was the best year for werewolf movies, and I don't know what might be the best year for vampire movies, but you could argue this one is just because of the strength of this one in Blade. That was so much fun thinking about, wow, look at what they can do now in Blade. Despite what you might think of the CGI now, back then it was tolerable, I suppose, if you want to look at it like that. But to me, I just, again, I love a movie that has practical effects. You get them in here. I like the movie that has gore that's not just senseless, but it's there, and you get it. The gore's purpose in this movie was to let you know early on, Valek's a badass motherfucker. He's 6'4", 6'5". He's alluring. He's powerful. He's everything Terry Silver was in Cobra Kai. You get that.
Yeah.
You cannot fake that. You cannot act that. Either you're it, you have that, no matter what they call you in a movie, or you don't. He's got that in spades. So good casting has got to be on point.
You also get to see Shirley Lee naked on the bed, tied.
Kind of, sort of, whatever. You know, Carpenter's never really been distasteful.
No. But Kirby also points out too, it's cool. Yeah, vampires are creepy. They're not romantic. They smell bad, and they have real shitty breath. Yes, I believe that's a line from what's his name, Daniel Baldwin. You know,
if you just listen to this scene with James Woods talking to the priest a couple times, basically upschooling him on what vampires are really like and what you have to do. There's just some great dialogue in here, and I would challenge almost anybody to think of somebody that today that could come up with that. The only person I think now, despite the fact he's done a lot of girly stuff, it would be interesting to see Gerard Butler in something like this. I could see him doing that
as
in his
a
own
remake.
way.
I would love that. Like I said, he's got the aggressiveness for this. You know, the guy obviously he's tall, you know, but he's kind of overlooked for certain roles. I mean, he proved that in you know, the Angels Fall and all that stuff. He is a good action star. Charles Bronson, Vampire Hunter, sign me up, says Ed Brewer.
Take my money.
Yes, right. Unfortunately, he's dead. He played the undead vampire. But like I said, I would love to see this rebooted. But then again, there's that that thing in my head. If it's not the original director, you know, redoing it, it's basically just going to be woke trash. And I know people hate that word, woke trash, because while it applies, they're just going to make it the Netflix treatment, diversify it. You'll basically get what they you get the Jamie Foxx, you know, movie. That's what you get.
I try forgetting about that one.
Something like
Day
Daybreakers. Day Shift. That's what it is. But overall, like I said, this was a fun movie. The vampires, yes, are freaking creeping here. The only thing that kills them is sunlight or a stake to the heart, repeatedly to the heart, as the priest tried to do. He succeeded. And crosses don't work on them. They can walk right into a church. There's no sacred ground in these vampires. So like that's even more creepy because like usually like, you know, the rule is like, well, you have to invite the vampire in. He can't come in your house.
Like Carpenter said, he wanted to make everything kind of distinct in his own, and he did that.
True,
So,
and it
and
works.
all that, he succeeded.
It just makes him much harder to kill. And like I said, it's like you're screwed. Like you said, the master is like one evil son of a bitch, and he can't. He's unkillable. Even at the end part where he gets crossed through his chest, he's like, "You can't kill me." I'm like, that's freaking Terry Silver, man, saying those lines. I'm thinking like, I'm getting a little.
I'll leave Ed Brewer with this note here. He's talking about Charles Bronson, Vampire Hunter.
Yeah.
Go ahead, finish up. I'm too busy laughing.
I'm just saying, between the ending scene of this movie, Terry Silver amping it up, and then Charles Bronson, Vampire Hunter, I got a little bit of mahogany going here.
Steven Seagal, Vampire Hunter. So you call that a
John
cross?
Malkovich as the Vampire Hunter?
Stop. No John Malkovich
no.
here. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We're going to drop Christine from 1983, a quick review of that. We did that offline here. We'll be dropping that soon. Sunday Slasher, we're going to be doing The Curse of Frankenstein, the Hammer horror film here. Professor Pix will be joining us for that. And we'll have one or two other things to drop. So have a good week, guys. Enjoy the show. Thanks for watching, listening, and we'll see you soon. And always, of course, I've got to remember, if you don't know by now, my advice to you, appropriately taken, would be this: stay extreme.
Later, guys. Have a good Halloween.